I was standing there, staring at $5 million in cold hard cash, and all I could think about was how easy it was to look Jimmy in the eye and lie through my teeth while the cameras were rolling for the entire world to see. You probably think you know what a person would do for that kind of money, but until you're standing in the middle of a massive stadium with the bright lights of the Beast games blinding you and a literal mountain of money within arm's reach, you have no idea how fast your morals can just evaporate into thin air. We didn't just play the game, we broke it, we exploited every single loophole, and we manipulated the most famous creator on the planet to walk away with the biggest prize in history. I'm sitting here now, months later, with a bank account that doesn't even look real, but every time I close my eyes, I see the look of genuine shock on the producers' faces when they realized what we had actually done. Was I wrong for doing whatever it took to secure my future? Or would you have played the villain too if it meant you never had to worry about a bill for the rest of your life? I need you to listen to this entire story because it's not the polished, happy version you see on the screen. This is the raw, gritty truth of how a group of teenagers outsmarted a multi-million-dollar production. It all started with an email that felt like a prank, a notification that I had been selected as one of the final contestants for the biggest event in YouTube history. At first, it was just excitement, but as I met the other guys, Kyle, Leo, and Marcus, during the orientation at the hotel, the vibe shifted from, "I'm happy to be here," to "we need to win this at any cost." We were all young, mostly 19 or 20, and we all came from backgrounds where $5 million wasn't just life-changing. It was world-altering. We spent our first 3 nights in that hotel room ignoring the no-strategy talk rules, whispering in the dark about how we could form an alliance that wasn't just about teamwork, but about absolute control over the game's mechanics. We noticed early on that the production staff was overwhelmed. There were so many moving parts, so many cameras, and so many contestants that they couldn't possibly track every single conversation or every subtle signal. We developed a code, a way of communicating through hand gestures and specific phrases that sounded like casual small talk, but were actually instructions on how to hoard resources and sabotage the older contestants who we knew would be our biggest threats. By the time we stepped onto the set for the first day of filming, we weren't just contestants. We were a unit operating with surgical precision. Jimmy was there, full of that high energy he's known for, telling us that this would be the hardest challenge of our lives, and I remember just smirking because he had no idea we had already rigged the social dynamics of the entire group. The games were brutal, physically and mentally draining, designed to break you down until you were desperate enough to make mistakes. But we had each other's backs in ways the rules never intended. During the first major elimination round, which involved a massive physical obstacle course combined with a memory puzzle, we didn't just run for ourselves. We strategically blocked paths for others, making it look like accidental bumps in the chaos, while whispering the answers to the memory puzzles to each other as we passed. We were essentially acting as one person with 4 bodies. The producers saw the footage of us helping each other and framed it as beautiful sportsmanship and the power of friendship, but in reality, we were systematically ensuring that our 4-man cell remained intact while the strong solo players were picked off one by one. I felt a slight pang of guilt when I saw an older guy, a father who had talked about paying off his mortgage, get eliminated because Marcus had subtly swapped his puzzle pieces when the cameras were focused on a different section of the arena. But then I thought about the $5 million. I thought about my mom's debt, about the tiny apartment I was living in, and that guilt just turned into a cold, hard resolve to keep going. We were deep in the belly of the beast now, and there was no turning back. As the days bled into weeks, the environment became a pressure cooker of paranoia and fatigue. We were sleeping on thin mats in a communal holding area, the air thick with the smell of sweat and anxiety. This was where the real work happened. While other contestants were trying to catch a few hours of sleep, we were running drills. We practiced our poker faces and our shocked reactions in the communal mirrors. We even started planting false rumors about each other to make it seem like our alliance was crumbling. I would walk up to a group of contestants from the Midwest and tell them that Kyle was planning to backstab me, tears almost welling up in my eyes. They'd comfort me, tell me I was a good kid, and then they'd go off and target Kyle, which was exactly what we wanted because Kyle was our tank. He was strong enough to survive their sabotage while we focused on the final objective, The level of psychological warfare we were engaging in was beyond anything I thought a 19-year-old was capable of. We weren't just playing a game. We were creating a narrative that the editors could use, a narrative that made us look like underdogs while we were actually the puppeteers. Every meal was a strategy meeting disguised as casual bonding. We would sit with the older players, listening to their dreams. One woman wanted to open a community center. Another guy wanted to pay for his daughter's rare medical surgery. It was heartbreaking, honestly. But whenever I felt that lump in my throat, I'd look at Marcus, and he'd give me the signal, a simple tap on his wrist, reminding me that time was running out and we needed to focus. We realized that to win $5 million, you have to be willing to be the person who takes it away from someone who actually needs it. It's a dark realization to have at 20 years old. We began hoarding small items that weren't strictly forbidden but gave us an edge. Extra hydration packets, extra bits of rope from previous challenges, even scraps of paper where we could sketch out the arena layouts. We were treating this like a military operation. By the middle of the competition, the field had narrowed down significantly, and the stakes were getting terrifyingly high. The games were getting more complex, involving social deduction and trust exercises that were clearly meant to sow discord among the remaining players. This was where our plan almost fell apart. There was a segment where we had to vote on who deserved to move forward and who should be sacrificed to increase the total prize pool. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. People were crying, begging for their spot, and the cameras were zooming in on every tear. We had to be careful. If we appeared too close, the other players would catch on and band together to vote us out. We staged a fake argument in front of everyone, making it look like Leo and I had a falling out over a previous challenge. It was high-level acting. I shouted at him, he pushed me back, and the producers loved every second of the drama. In reality, that fight gave us the cover we needed to vote in a way that seemed scattered, but was actually calculated to eliminate the smartest girl in the group who had started to get suspicious of our signals. We were playing a game within a game. And the deeper we got, the more it felt like we were characters in a movie rather than kids on a game show. So that is the situation I was in. We were halfway through, the villains in disguise, and the $5 million was finally starting to feel like a real possibility instead of a distant dream. We had lied, we had sabotaged, and we had manipulated our way to the top. And now the games were about to get even more intense. Before I tell you about the final betrayal that secured the win, and the moment Jimmy realized something was wrong, I want you to pause right now and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have stayed loyal to the spirit of the game and risked losing everything? Or would you have done exactly what we did to ensure your life changed forever? Be honest, because when that kind of money is on the line, people do things they never thought they were capable of. After that voting round, the atmosphere turned toxic. The remaining contestants who weren't in our circle began to realize that something was off. We had to pivot. We started adopting other players into our group one by one, giving them a false sense of security only to use them as shields in the next physical challenge. There was this one girl, Sarah, who was incredibly fast. We convinced her that we would all split the money with her if she helped us finish a relay race ahead of a group of former athletes. She pushed herself to the point of collapse, literally vomiting on the sidelines after the win, thinking she had just secured her future. That night, during the private deliberation, we voted her out. Seeing her face when Jimmy announced her name, that look of pure, unadulterated betrayal, is something that still haunts my dreams. But Marcus just leaned over and whispered, "That's $1 million closer to our goal." And I forced myself to nod. We were becoming monsters, but we were going to be very rich monsters. We even started manipulating the production assistants. We noticed that certain PAs were easier to talk to, and we'd accidentally overhear bits of information about what the next day's challenge might be. It wasn't full-blown cheating in the sense of stealing the answers, but it was enough to give us a 12-hour head start on mental preparation. We knew if there was going to be a water challenge, we'd spend the evening practicing breath-holding in the sinks. If it was a tower build, we'd study the structural integrity of the furniture in our room. We were obsessed. The hunger for that money had replaced our hunger for actual food. I remember looking in the mirror one morning and barely recognizing myself. My eyes were sunken, I'd lost 10 pounds, and I had this frantic, predatory look in my eyes. But then I'd think about the $5 million, and it all felt worth it. The final stage of the Beast games was a psychological nightmare. It was down to the last 6 people. The 4 of us and 2 others who were incredibly strong competitors. The final challenge was a test of endurance and unfiltered honesty, where we were hooked up to what they claimed were high-tech biometrics while being asked questions about our intentions. We knew this was the make-or-break moment. If the sensors picked up on our deception, it was over. But here's the thing about those lie detectors in reality TV. They often rely more on your physical reaction and stress levels than actual magic. We had spent the previous night doing breathing exercises, coaching each other on how to keep our heart rates low, while telling the most blatant lies possible. When it was my turn, Jimmy asked me if I had ever worked with anyone else to sabotage the game. I looked him straight in the eyes, my heart steady, and said, "No, I've played this game with total integrity because I want to prove to my family that hard work pays off." The green light flashed. The producers cheered. We had beaten the machine. But the real climax came when it was down to just the 4 of us and 1 remaining outsider. We had to decide who would take the final shot at the $5 million. The rules stated that if we couldn't reach a unanimous decision, the money would be forfeited entirely. This was the ultimate test. We knew the outsider would never vote for one of us, so we had to make him feel like he was part of our new alliance. We spent hours bonding with him, sharing fake stories about our struggles, making him feel like he was the leader of our group. Then, in the final voting room, we did the unthinkable. We didn't vote for him. We didn't even vote for each other. We used a specific loophole in the contract we had memorized, a clause that allowed for a group win if the final contestants were under a certain age and met specific performance metrics throughout the season. We had tracked our points perfectly. We forced a stalemate that triggered a legal review of the rules right there on set. The production went into a tailspin. Filming stopped for 4 hours as lawyers and executive producers huddled in a trailer. Jimmy looked genuinely stressed, pacing back and forth. We had found a crack in the system that they hadn't anticipated. Because of the way the games were structured and the specific wording of the Beast Games charter, our coordinated stalemate meant they either had to give us a shared victory or risk a massive lawsuit for unfair gaming practices. We had them backed into a corner. The tension during those 4 hours was unlike anything I've ever experienced. We were sitting in a small, air-conditioned tent, surrounded by security guards who wouldn't let us talk to each other. I could hear the shouting matches coming from the production trailer. They were furious. They wanted a single winner, a hero story, a one-person-takes-it-all finale that would go viral. What we gave them was a legal nightmare. One of the lead producers came into the tent, his face red, and told us we were ruining the show. He tried to intimidate us, saying they would edit us to look like the villains of the century. Cal just looked at him and said, "As long as the check clears, you can edit me to look like whoever you want." That was the moment I realized we had truly won. We weren't just contestants anymore. We were the ones holding the cards. They even tried to offer us a buyout, a smaller amount of money to just walk away and let them film a different ending with the other guy. We refused. We knew the math. $1 million each was more than they were offering to make the problem go away. We stood our ground. We looked at the cameras and said we weren't leaving until the terms of the contract were honored. It was the most intense game of chicken I've ever been a part of. My hands were shaking, but I kept them buried in my pockets so the cameras wouldn't see. We were 4 teenagers holding a multi-million-dollar corporation hostage, because we had read the fine print better than their own legal team. In the end, they had no choice. The optics of taking money away from a group of hardworking teens, who had technically followed the rules, would have been a PR nightmare. They resumed filming, and the atmosphere was completely different. The victory felt heavy. We stood there as the confetti fell, holding the oversized check, but the eyes of the crew weren't filled with the usual excitement. They were filled with a mix of respect and utter annoyance. We had cheated the system without breaking a single literal rule. We split the $5 million 4 ways. The aftermath was a whirlwind. I went from having $20 in my pocket to over $1 million. I bought my mom a house, I paid off my student loans, and I invested the rest. But the friendship we had? It dissolved almost instantly. Once the money was in our accounts, The bond we formed through deception felt tainted. We don't talk anymore. We're just four strangers who happen to share a secret about how we pulled off the greatest heist in YouTube history. The fame that followed was even weirder. When the episode finally aired, the internet was divided. Half the people called us geniuses, and the other half sent us death threats for robbing the other contestants. I had to delete my social media for 3 months just to breathe. Every time I see a MrBeast video now, I don't see the fun or the games. I see the machinery, the loopholes, and the exhausted faces of the people behind the cameras. I see the reality of what it takes to reach that level of success, and how easily it can be dismantled by 4 kids with a plan. Even now, when I go to spend that money, I feel a strange coldness. I'll be buying a nice meal or a new piece of technology, and I'll remember the face of the guy whose daughter needed surgery, or the woman who wanted a community center. I'll wonder if they ever got their break. But then I look at my mom, who finally doesn't have to work 2 jobs anymore, and the coldness goes away. I realize that the world is a game, and some people are just better at finding the glitches than others. I didn't set out to be a villain, but the Beast games showed me that being the hero is a luxury only the rich can afford. For the rest of us, winning is the only thing that matters. We played the game, we won the money, and we walked away with our lives changed forever. Even if our reputations were dragged through the mud in the process. Looking back, I realized that the Beast games weren't just a test of strength or luck. They were a test of how much of your soul you're willing to trade for a vertical line in your bank account. I got the money, and I don't regret it for a second, but I also know that I'll never be the same person I was before I walked onto that set. It's a strange feeling to be a champion and a villain at the same time. If you think you would have played it differently, you're probably lying to yourself. You can say you're a good person all you want, but when $5 million is sitting on a table, and all you have to do is be a little bit ruthless, most people will choose the money every single time. It's the ultimate human truth. We just had the guts to prove it on a global stage. Like this video if you think we did what we had to do to win. And subscribe if you want to hear more stories about what really goes on behind the scenes of these massive shows. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did we win fair and square? Or did we ruin the spirit of the game? Would you have split the money or tried to take it all for yourself? I'll see you all in the next story.